Good afternoon. Merry Christmas. I hope everyone's getting ready for their holidays. We're happy that you took time out of your busy schedule to join us. And the beauty of this training is that it is so important for children, but we have it archived. So you can share it with other friends. You can use it for training if you're in a school district. If you assist parents, you can also have them view it. And it's on our website. Our website is www.okserc.org, and it would be listed with all of our Wisdom Wednesdays and all the topics we have there for training. Today we have Dr. Kaylin Coody. I've known Kaylin for a long time. I've admired her much longer than I've known her. She has a lifetime of experience in education, from special ed. She can maybe tell you more, to being a superintendent. She's currently working with the Oklahoma Schools Advisory Council and supports schools in training of how to serve children in different areas. So executive function is one of those areas that teachers seem to know little about, and we felt like it was a topic that might be supportive of our community of families and schools. So Kaylin, if you will take it from there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being asked to do this. Joe and I have worked together on many different things, and when she asked, I said, of course I'll do that, only for you, especially during Christmas time. But I'm very glad you're here, and I want to apologize up front. I had a computer malfunction this morning, but Rob and Joe and the group there are working with me. I don't especially like doing webinars. I like seeing your eyes. I like seeing people when I talk, but we're going to get through this. Rob's going to be my Vanna, and we'll get through this the best that we can. On that first slide, you have my contact information. Please know that you're welcome to contact me anytime if I can be of assistance. That's what my role is really now, is to support students and faculty and families of kids who are in our public schools. So please feel free to reach out to me. Rob, if you'd switch slides. I do appreciate you being a caregiver for our kids. We know how much our kids are needing this right now. I do a lot on trauma, and we know that we're dealing with that more than ever. So I appreciate your commitment and your willingness to do that. I do appreciate the demands you have. We are in an unknown time as far as the intense demands placed on families as well as our schools. So I very much appreciate what you do. Next. I do think that everything we talk about is so darn serious. So I want you to know I do throw in a few little funnies here and there. I think we have to smile, get those endorphins going. So when you see my little funnies, if you don't think they're funny, just smile anyway. You'll feel better. And if I could see you, I'd feel better. So we'll get some funnies in here. I know we've all felt that way, right? Wouldn't be a big deal, except I've never driven a bus. Next. I hope I don't forget. Rob, I'm on the one that says first. I do like to say I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. The information I'm sharing is just based on the wonderful people that I've had in my life. And the things that we've been able to accomplish. I do know we have a lot of different backgrounds, and so I'm not sure how many of you are out there, but we will move forward with some basic information on executive function. Next. So my goal today is just to share information with you to help improve environments for kids, as much as anything to get you thinking. I'm an old speech path, and speech paths have some training in this area, but I find most school teachers do not. And this is a big frustration for them. So we're going to run through some information that I hope is very practical. I'm a very practical person, and some things that are give you some good baseline information, as well as some practical things to work with these students. Next. So who am I? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this except to say this is my crew. This is who keeps me centered. My husband and I both retired. We kind of suck at retirement. We're both still working with school people, different schools, but we retired a total. We had 78 years of education between us when we retired a few years back. We have 2 children. Our son Brian, in the plaid shirt there in the back, is a captain at a fire department. His wife, Kim, is an assistant superintendent of schools, and they have a 16-year-old. Our daughter on the other side is a middle school math teacher. She was a horrible math student and finally figured it out in college, and that is her passion. Her husband's in private business, and you can see there they have a 20-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter. A pleasant surprise we never expected, and she has been the light of our lives. We were screaming on Santa's lap just last night. I was a speech pathologist for many years. I then took an assistant superintendent and ultimately a superintendent's job. I loved all of them. I probably would still be doing that, except this position came up at OSAC. At OSAC, I'm the associate director, and OSAC's a nonprofit, and our goal, our mission is simply to provide support for schools. I travel the state doing trainings, getting phone calls, going and kids that are especially troubling in a school, maybe go give another set of eyes. So I love the mission that we have in OSAC. I believe heartily in what we need right now is just lots of support. So out in those school systems. So this is kind of who I am. Next. I bet some of you can relate to this, especially today for me. I don't know where the iCloud is. I don't know how it gets there, and I sure don't know how to get it back. So I think a lot of us can relate to that. Next. So we're going to talk about executive function today, and it means a lot of different things. So I'm going to tell you, first of all, there are a lot of different models. I have pulled out what I think are the most critical for the classroom and kind of narrowed those down quite a bit, but there are a lot of different models for this. Next. So rule number 1 is I want you first and foremost to not think about or look at your phone until I tell you to. So that's your number 1 rule today, is nobody is to think about or look at their phone as we go through this today. So what is executive function? Rob. Executive function refers to the skills that help us focus, plan, prioritize, work towards goals, self-regulate, adapt to new and unexpected situations, and then ultimately to be able to engage in abstract thinking and planning. So it's basically what you do from the time you wake up till the time you go to bed. That's no different for children. Next. Executive functions are controlled by the frontal lobes of the brain. Those frontal lobes are connected with all the other parts of the brain, and they coordinate the activities of the different regions. I'm a brain person. I love learning about the brain, and executive function certainly is all-encompassing almost when it comes to the brain. Next. So think of a conductor. What a conductor would do with an orchestra. The executive function, supervise and coordinate a multitude of different things going on in your brain all at once. Next. I keep hearing it takes a village to raise a child. Do they just show up, or is there a number to call? I felt that way last night. Next. So there are many models. I've chose one that I think is easy to grasp and to implement. So I focus on these 3 areas of executive function. The first is working memory. Next, inhibitory control. That's the biggie that drives us crazy at school. And then cognitive or mental flexibility. Next. So these 3 areas, I want you to think of it this way. Working memory, that's grabbing important information. If you were trying to drive a car, grabbing that important information along the roadway. What is it that you need to hang on to? Oh, that's the street I should turn at. Those kinds of things that you have in your working memory. Inhibitory control then is when you go, oh, it's a yellow light. Should I stop? Should I not? That's inhibition of your control system. Cognitive controls when you go, oops, that road's closed. I'm going to have to go a different way. So I like that way of thinking of executive function with this model, is to think of how your brain does this day in, day out, and you don't even think about it. Next. So working memory, we'll start there. It's the ability to hold information in our minds while we think about it. So I love talking about memory. I could spend an hour or so talking about memory and how that works. But the bottom line is our brain filters out almost everything that comes in through your senses. It only hangs on to a few things. I always say to teachers, if you want kids to remember something, you got to have a hook. You've got to have a hook. Most that sensory memory that comes in for the most part lasts less than 3 seconds. So think about that. You give a kid instruction, you walk away, you go to your desk, you come back, it's gone. That's because they didn't have a hook to say, hang on to this information. Next. So this is the model that I like when we talk about memory. You can see that sensory memory, all this stuff comes in, but most of it's forgotten. So if you have a hook, you pay attention to it, then that moves it over to that working memory. Again, if we don't hang, a lot of that goes away. If we don't hang on to it, it's gone. If we don't practice it, it's gone in about 15 seconds. Practicing, rehearsal, doing that over and over is what moves it over to long-term memory so that we can encode it, we can put it in our file cabinet, and we know where to go get it to pull it back out. So this is one of my favorite models when it comes to working memory, how memory works. Next. So an academic example would be you're holding multiple different problems, aspects of a problem in your mind, keeping track of where are we in a multi-step solution. You're having to do several things, and you have to hold that information on what we're doing now, but what's next. A social emotional kind of example is holding someone's point of view in mind and comparing it maybe to your own while you're considering how you're going to respond. So holding on to that as you're getting ready to express yourself requires some working memory. So what happens when you work with memory? You store new information, you recall old information, you consciously manipulate it. So you may think it's 918, you say a phone number, and you go, oh no, that's home number. I've got to get their cell number. So we manipulate information. It's a short-term form of declarative memory as well, and we do that a lot. Why did I call? You have to remember all this information. What's that guy's name? Who is it he's working for? What was I calling about? What's that phone number? Oh my gosh, I've got to remember he's press number 7. All that stuff we hang on to just in making a phone call. That's all using our working memory. So what does it look like? Following the rules of a game, doing mental math, completing chores in order, remember the details of a story. Those are all the things that require some working memory for us to be able to complete that task at the end, whatever that is. So how does it feel? So I want you to remember this. So listen carefully. Here's what you're going to remember. Again, I love doing this in person, but let's just say I said to you, I want to go to dinner with our group. I'd like you to pick me up at 10401 South 57th West Avenue. You're going to go east on Highway 192 for about 6 miles, turn left on Prairie and go 4 blocks. And when you get to Smith, turn right. And it's about the third house on the left. How much of that can you repeat? That's working memory. We have to have a hook to hang on to the details. We throw that at a minimum, that kind of information out to kids all the time, all day long, every day. And then we're shocked when they don't hang on to it. So that's kind of a feel for working memory. If you could repeat back to me then what the address is, how many miles was it on Prairie? We all have to work with our working memory, and it's not always easy. I believe this so much. I'm sorry, Rob, I'm on what gives people feelings of power. If you look at that little slide, that is so true. If you work with young children, you know it's true. What gives people feelings of power and with our kids is typically not money or status, but it's being the line leader. It's being accepted and being one of the group. Next is on 2, inhibitory control. So what is this? This is the ability to suppress a thought or an idea or to refrain from doing something that we would otherwise do. This is the thing that I believe drives us craziest in schools. It's the calls I get the most often saying, oh my gosh, they're killed this kid. We got a new kid. He's killing us. We've got to get some other eyes in here to look because they don't have good control. Behavior is the thing that I'm called about most often. So we all know this is an issue in schools. So we struggle with this in the classroom. Next, I'm sorry, Rob. One of the major issues we struggle with in the classroom. Next. So there's different ways to handle that, isn't there? So this one says, your class is so quiet and well behaved. And the teacher said, I told them the glue sticks were lip balm. So that's one way of getting silence in a classroom, I guess. And the teacher had a little bit of impulse control there, I'm thinking. Next. So an academic example would be not leaping to the very first possible solution with something, but questioning assumptions, considering other alternatives. My great example for this for elementary kids is you can say to most children, what is a noun? And they will spew at you instantly, person, place, or thing. They have no idea what that means, right? And you have to stop and say, whoa, whoa. Tell me again now, what does it mean? What is a noun? And so that impulse, that jumping in, that kid that as soon as you have started a question, as soon as you get what out of your mouth, they've got their hand in the air. That's an impulse control issue. Jumping out of their seats, emotionally reacting, and often overreacting because they didn't get the whole message and therefore they react to incomplete information. Social emotional example, not blowing out candles in somebody else's cake, not blurting out how stupid that is if you disagree. Being able to manage deferred gratification. You saw my little 2-year-old granddaughter. This has been her dad. I love him dearly. He's mine, my son-in-law. He has an interesting background, but he is probably, of all the kids I ever worked with, he's probably in the top 3 as far as ADHD and impulse control issues. He still has those, and he's now a grown adult. However, he has learned many compensations for that. But I have been determined that Hayden is not going to have that if I can help it. So I spend a lot of time teaching her, wait. Those kind of things we can do with children. Hold up your finger to say, give me 1 minute. Wait, give me 1 minute. But you just have to make sure you get back to them in 1 minute, or they won't trust you to then try to delay gratification for themselves to gain that control. Next. So I think this starts in infancy. When we say to babies, hold on. I put her in a high chair. I would give her a Cheerio. She would want more. We taught her the sign for more. She would want more. I would say, wait, give me 1 minute. If she could sit still for 10 seconds, I then gave her another to build that ability to hang on just a second. That involves some trust. Therefore, you've got to make sure you do your part in trying to build up a child's ability to self-control. Next. So the first big leap in attaining inhibition starts in the preschool years. So at a very young age, we start seeing this if we're working with it. If you're working, I was working with a first grader the other day who this is a major problem. And as soon as she's not an acting out child, she just stops. And as soon as she is done, she's done. And so I was talking to her mother, and it became pretty obvious that this child she's an only child. She's never been really managed. She's never been told no, wait, no. Mom just kind of always does whatever the kid asks to do. So now she's struggling in school because that's not how that works in a classroom with 20 kids. So we know that this starts early for our kids. By the age of 4, most children show signs of being able to manage this. They can have that pure response inhibition just when you say stop, or more complex inhibition tasks like hold this candy, but you can't eat it till I get back. Sit right here and I'll come back and get you and we'll get a drink. Those kind of ability, that 2 and 3 step ability, that's a complex inhibition task. Next. So inhibition continues to improve, particularly from the ages of 5 to 8. And guess what? That's when we're getting them, isn't it, in the kindergarten, first grade, second grade. So we know how important it is to really grab hold of that while this is developing, and particularly for tasks that combine both inhibition and working memory. Wait, think about that. Give them a second and go, now what do we think? So they're maintaining inhibition, but they're also having to go back to their file cabinet and pull out information. That is a complex task, but something we expect kids to do throughout the day once they start school. Next. This continues to develop at later ages, especially on computerized tasks. Our kids love computers, and that it, in many ways, feeds that you don't have to wait for anything. You just push the button. So we have to be sure that we're not overdoing, we hear that all the time, screen time. However, I do believe that that certainly interferes a lot with that inhibition, because they are totally in control of the computer or an iPad or whatever they're using. To be just push a button and get what they want. So we have to really work at this as kids get older. As I mentioned, I happen to have a son-in-law who is extremely ADHD, and my son is ADD. He was never the hyper kid, but it took a lot of training with both of them, even as they got older, to go, well, no, wait, you didn't hear it out. Wait, and that wait is an important skill that we have to teach our kids and our adults sometimes. Next. So what does self-control look like? That's raising your hand in class instead of blurting out. That's waiting in line, waiting your turn, saying that often. Don't assume they just know that. Saying that often to your kids. Wait, is it your turn? Wait, we have to wait till it's our turn. Doing work in an undistracted way, being able to focus sufficiently to, in your brain, go, you know what, I really would like to go grab that cookie, but I have to do this first. So that ability to self-control and continue undistracted. Sharing toys without an issue. This is not only young kids, we think of our pre-K kids, but even our older kids, being able to share people, being able to share time and space can be an issue. Next. So how does that feel? So I want you to look at my pictures. Look at this. This is called the Stroop test. So I'm going to ask you to do this. Again, I'd like to see your eyes. But what I want you to do is just to yourself say the color, just the color. So go across there. When you get down to about row 2, 3, 4, 5, you start realizing that you're having to double work here. You're having to look at the color, but it's not what you're used to seeing for the color name. So this is an ability, this requires the ability to inhibit, stop what you wanted to say, inhibit that response, and to say something else. That takes attention, mental speed, and mental control. Just an example of being able to have that self-control. So I want to know now, have you looked at or thought about your phone at all? I would be willing to say most of you have. We've only been doing this for, how long? Only 25 minutes. And I would say most of you have been unable to completely attend without looking at your phone. Yet we expect kids to do that all day long. So that's just an example of that ability to inhibit what is an impulse for us as an adult. Probably speeding and lights are the ones that I see the most in adults. If you're sitting at a red light, you want to make sure the other guys stop first because they run those a lot. Next. This is how it feels, doesn't it? Just trying to get that 1 or 2 students to come on. Smile just a little bit. Cognitive flexibility. So this is the third part of this model is cognitive flexibility. So what is that? It's the ability to change your mindset when the rules of the world around us change. So like I said, I know how to get from here to the grocery store. Oh my gosh, it's blocked. Now what do? I can't run through a blocked road. I have to rethink. And this happens in the school world. We have interruptions all the time. And we know specifically our students with autism or those that have difficulty with change, we know this is a really big issue for them. And so we have to teach kids that ability to have cognitive flexibility. There's several names for it, but cognitive flexibility simply means, I think I'm doing this. Oh, well, wait, no, I'm not. I'm going to have to do that. For me in my world, that is the name of the game. Flexibility is the name of the game. Today, for example, with my computer bombed. But we just know that we have to be flexible. That's the world we live in. Many of our students struggle a great deal with this. So let's look at some things on cognitive flexibility. So in order to have cognitive flexibility, here are three things that you need. You need to have an awareness of it. You need to be aware of the fact that, I do have to change. You have to then be able to adapt based on the circumstances that face you. And last, you have to have the confidence to be able to go, it's okay, I can do that. It's okay, I can go a different way. It's okay. I have a t-shirt that says, it's okay, it's all going to be fine. And that's kind of my mantra. But many of our kids, many adults, again, struggle with having these three components to be able to have that true cognitive flexibility that's required to function in the real world. So an academic example is when our original approach to a problem doesn't work and then we have to find other approaches, looking at problems from a different point of view, being able to change direction based on once you get a different piece of information, I'm going to have to do it differently. A social emotional example would be looking at personal experiences from different points of view and being able to change direction on the basis of new information. I've had I can tell you the last 6 weeks, we have had a tremendous amount of medical problems within my family, everything from my husband having a heart attack. I'm waiting right now on a call from a surgeon for my 28-year-old nephew for me to get him in for surgery. Every day has required this. Every day I think I'm going to do this and maybe buy Christmas presents. And instead I get a phone call and now we're having to run do that. And so it just is what it is. But that is emotionally making those shifts sometimes. I may have a strong opinion about something, but then when I talk to that doctor and he goes, no, you missed this part. It's like, oh, I see where you're coming from. So that's kind of what that means in a social emotional example. Next. So it's the ability to change your mind or what you're thinking about to switch gears and to think of multiple concepts simultaneously. So just to be able to switch gears and move to the next, I've got to do it differently than I was planning. Being able to disengage from one task and engage in a different task. Again, at school, our kids often have trouble with this. Our young ones certainly have trouble with this. So when I like playing in the sandbox, and you're going to put the lid on it. Are you kidding me? Now I'm going to have a meltdown. That's an inability to switch those tasks and have that cognitive flexibility. The cognitive ability to know, but it's not going away. It'll be there another day. That's a little bit different for our young ones. But that flexibility that's so essential. So if you're looking at this, sorting cards. So if I said to you, which one of these, what's the correct answer here? What's the correct answer? Well, you might immediately go, well, those 3 dots are red, so it must be the triangle. Oh, those 3 dots, maybe the stars, but more than likely, maybe it's the yellow pluses, or it's dots, so it must be the blue. There's more than one answer. And we have to remind children of that often. There's more than one way to do this. There's more than one correct answer. It's okay for someone to have a difference of opinion. That doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong. So what does it look like? Well, it's switching from play to mealtime. It would be an example of that. So I'm having a great time watching Encanto, but it's time to turn that off so we can have a meal, and kids have difficulty with that. Solving math problems where you have to make decisions like, is this subtraction or is this multiplication? Solving problems like that takes some mental I thought it was going to be addition, but you know what? You can do it with multiplication too. That's a mental flexibility switch. Making up a new story. I love storytelling with kids. Again, my 2-year-old our little granddaughter has reminded me of this, in that she is now at 2 years and 2 months starting to make up stories. And you can pretend and play. That's very important for young kids to do that pretend play, to be able to switch and to storytell. I told you my daughter's a middle school math teacher. One of the things she loves to do is those little squish balls that you can find everywhere. She teaches her kids how to use those in a classroom. So she says, I don't even know, 3 times 12. She pitches it to a kid, they give an answer. She asks another question, that kid pitches it to another kid. And then she'll say freeze. Now, what's another thing? What's another multiplication that could end up at the answer 12? That flexibility that we can build in with just in the classroom. Handling change and new experiences. So change is difficult for many of our kids, and I know several adults that that's difficult for them, that are non-disabled adults. But change is very hard. I like change if I think it's fixing a problem. I'm kind of a change agent, but not just for the sake of change, but because we can make it better. But many times our children struggle with that, not knowing how to handle change. Next. So how does it feel? So I want you to look at this. This day-night activity. So when I show this picture, I want you to say the opposite word out loud. So if it's a picture of day, you're going to say night. If it's a picture of night, you're going to say day. This, again, is that mental flexibility. So here we go. Next. Next. Say them out loud. Next. 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 Out loud. Next. 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 So do you feel that flexibility that your brain had to use for that? You had to stop and think. And that's when we have kids that are struggling, you can imagine how difficult that becomes. They have to process it. Your students with learning disabilities often take longer to process. So those switching, having to think and go, oh, no, it's not that, it's this, takes more mental flexibility and processing. They have double the processing time here. So that can be a big drain on those kids that are struggling with that. Next. Go ahead and smile. I shouldn't have put this in before Christmas probably, because we'll all have to worry about that, won't we? Next. So what's typical? So let's just look at a couple of some of the data that tells us what's typical. Next. So age-appropriate tasks for pre-K age kids include things like negotiating with not pushing, arguing, crying, carrying through on a simple plan, giving kids simple tasks, one-step tasks, and then increasing that as they get successful at that. Very simple plans. Internalizing rules and expectations. And I think sometimes in school we don't verbalize to children enough that we assume they know the rule is you sit on your carpet square. The rule is you don't go to the bathroom without asking. We have to verbalize those. These kids are coming from all different households that probably don't run the way ours does. And so we have to make sure that we're giving them those expectations and rules that we expect them to follow. Demonstrating control over impulsive behavior. My favorite thing is whoa, stop, wait. I use those words a lot with young ones, especially to say, whew, take a breath, blow it out. Let's take a breath. To stay focused for short periods of time. We have to understand that's very developmental. That you can find different research that says different things, but I think in a classroom setting, young kids, 15 minutes probably is tops before you expect to take a brain break, get up and move around, switch topics, something that gives a break. Older kids should be able to go 25, 35 minutes probably. That's a stretch. Adults no more than about 50 minutes before you take a stretch. So you can see that my brain breaks are my funnies to try to help keep you engaged and not allow you to go too long without switching thinking just a little bit. But teaching kids to stay focused over short periods of time and then gradually increasing that time. For elementary age, multi-step tasks such as cleaning a bedroom, helping out in the yard, sorting laundry, where you have to do this part and then you take it. Our 2-year-old, we were out raking leaves. Her job was to stand there, pick up the leaves as she could, put them in a bucket, take them over to Papa so that he could put them in the trash. And so trying even at 2 to get her understanding multi-step tasks here. Managing homework projects. with support from parents, certainly with elementary age. They can't usually just take off with it. But giving them into a habit of a calendar or planner. When we talk about self-control and those kind of things, teaching kids using structure, using having a schedule that kids know what to expect can help them maintain control. That's why we use visual schedules so much with our students that struggle with this, so that they can figure out that if I follow the schedule, things go well for me. And then increasing independence. I'm huge on this. I spent some time on the OSU special ed Zoom that they do every other Monday, talking about paras. This is a huge concern with paras, is that paras, more and more parents are wanting one-to-one paras. There are certainly children that need those, but I think they're few and far between. I think that now in our education, what we're doing is providing one-to-one pairs because we don't have teachers. And so we have non-experienced or non-trained people that are really leading the lives of these kids with disabilities. I have a real concern with that. But you have to teach your parents about independence. They're not going to be there always. Parents aren't going to be there always. We have to make sure that these kids are gaining. I don't do it for them all the time. The role of a parent is to back out at every opportunity, in my opinion. So those are some tasks for elementary age kids, and certainly for our kids with disabilities. Next, again, for elementary, gathering materials. What are you going to need? What are you going to need to do this? What are you going to need to do this project? What are you going to need to complete this task? Inhibition of inappropriate behavior. That's huge. Learning to raise their hand. Learning that when they need to go to the restroom, there's a process for that. Learning that when the teacher's talking, you don't talk. Those are inhibition, teaching inhibition. The ability to go with the flow and change plans is needed. There's usually less tantrums with our kids in this age range as they become more and more flexible. So our kids that don't handle change well, one of the reasons those visual schedule works is they can see, oh, I do this, and then I do this, and then I get that. And that's worth more to me than a tantrum. So the more we can teach them, though, to go with the flow and it's going to be okay if tomorrow we don't have PE. That's going to be okay. Next. Now you have to smile. This is clever, you have to admit, and oh so true. Next. So executive function in teams, what do we expect? We expect them to be able to independently plan steps. Again, I'll say to you, different kids come from different households, and this is encouraged and taught differently. And so we have to remember that some kids may need to be taught how to independently plan and give steps. We think by middle school they should have that. Many, I think, do not. That they're able to work in a group. I also have a program, an internship program that I started at Hilldale years ago, and I keep giving it away and they keep giving it back to me. But this is one of the things that business owners have said to me for 20 years. Our kids don't know how to work in groups and then switch to being independent. They can't figure all of that out, to work in groups and then, but I'm going to be able to do this part independently. Following complex schedules and routines, having time management. We all struggle with this. As how do I manage all of these doctor appointments while Christmas shopping, while taking care of a 2-year-old occasionally, while my husband's recovering. We all have that, and we have to help our kids learn how to do that without meltdowns, without falling apart. Next. Able to sort through more complex problems. So problem solving. The second thing that employers have said to me for many years is that kids don't know how, they're used to being spoon-fed and they don't know how to problem solve. This is a huge part of executive function, that ability to go, let me think about that a minute. What could I do? What are the options here? And then I make a good choice. Our kids struggle with that. I am huge about empathy. I think there's 3 different levels of empathy, but I think our kids have become very limited in a bit, not only kids, adults, with empathy. and the ability to not only feel bad for someone, first of all, to feel bad for someone, but then secondly, to feel bad and relate to it. And thirdly, to be able to feel bad, relate to it, and say, but what can I do to help? And I think we've lost a lot of that. And so I think that has to be taught to kids. Managing impulses with self-talk. I'm sure you do that. I do that all the time. If I'm getting stressed, and I find myself talking out loud, and someone might even say, who are you talking to? Well, just me. But teaching kids that can help you to stay organized in your brain, manage that impulse to want to throw it down instead of putting together whatever they're doing. And the ability to monitor and adjust. That's that flexible thinking again. Not only am I aware of it, I see what I'm doing. Oh, I see where I made a mistake. Socially, I said something. Oh, I see by the look on their face that was not a good thing to say. How do I monitor that and then adjust for that? Is an example of executive function. Next. For middle school and high school kids, at the early end of this stage, it's appropriate for kids to become more aware of schedule and anticipate events. They should be able to start keeping track of things, is what that's saying. So I know that every Tuesday and Thursday I have PE. I've got to remember to wear tennis shoes that day. That they need to be doing that, and we need to help them learn to do that. Towards the end of that, they should be able to manage their own schedules independently. Again, understanding that kids come from different homes and not all of them are taught that way. My nephew, 28 years old, just this morning, he has serious health issues. Just this morning, when I said, have you heard from the doctor? His answer is, I'm calling St. Francis Hospital. St. Francis knows nothing about you. That's a wasted phone call. Call the doctor's office. He doesn't know how to manage anything medically, and he doesn't have experience at that. So we can't just get upset with people. We have to teach them how to do this. Next. Academically, middle school and high school kids increasingly should be working independently. If they're constantly needing someone to sit beside them, then we maybe have more of an attention issue that needs to be addressed, but they shouldn't need us to sit and do everything for them as they get towards that end of their school career. They should be able to see what they need to do, gather their materials, follow through, maybe with a little push every now and then, push them on through. I believe from my experience in schools over these years, they're not very good at that. And so that takes teaching them, not just expecting them to gain it through osmosis. Next. For our older young adults, they should be able to develop and maintain multiple different plans, make long-term goals. My goal today is to make sure I get to this appointment, but this week I've got to make sure I get this and this and this done. Using routines and modifying schedules as it's needed. They should be able to be flexible with things. Prioritizing and making plans for activities. Generate solutions, even to difficult situations. What are our options here? What could we do about this? What's the best of those options then? Managing their impulses. You know, I'd like to knock out that guy that just ran the stop sign in front of me, but that's not an okay thing to do. So being able to manage those impulses. That's where road rage comes in, isn't it? That's an issue with impulse control. Able to sustain attention despite distractions going on. I've mentioned to you, I tell my family they give me such good material for my talks. My son-in-law, this is one of the things that I see that he has really worked at, is whatever's going on, and he's gone the opposite extreme now. Sometimes you almost have to touch him because when you're saying something, he's so focused on what he's doing, he doesn't even hear you. So he's gotten good at being able to sustain his attention much of the time, but almost to the opposite extreme. And then establishing strategies for attention. What do I have to do? Ryan, my son-in-law, can tell me specific strategies that he has to do for attention self-regulation that he didn't have until he was probably in his 30s out of the Marine Corps. Next. So it doesn't stop there. Keep in mind the human brain takes around 25 years to fully develop. So the bad news for that is school people, you're not going to see it all. um, Even at 18, what we think of as adulthood, they still are developing that frontal lobe, and that's what's responsible for executive functions. So we have to understand that in school, we're not going to see the end product when it comes to these things that drive us crazy at school. Next. This is also my son-in-law. Absolutely, absolutely. Smile, it's good for you. Next. So some characteristics we might see of children struggling with executive function. Just general delays sometimes. Some of our kids have just general delays in their developmental areas. Significant differences in responses to different information. So our kids that are extremely light sensitive, our kids that are extremely sound sensitive, touch sensitive, those may be kids that are struggling with that orchestrating of everything going on in their prefrontal cortex. They become easily frustrated and struggle to manage controls, or they're not easily calmed back down. As again, are indicators of students who may be having some executive function issues. They're rigid with routine. Again, I think of our kids with autism that are quite rigid with their routine, can't change. Next, they struggle to make adjustments after getting used to doing a certain way. I encountered that even as a superintendent with the adults when I went to a new district. No, this is how we do it. Well, it may be, but it really sucks. It's really not a good way to do it. Let's look. Can we look at some other things? But people get in their ruts within their mind, and this is how we do it, and they're often struggle then to change that. They may be having difficulty completing what we think of as simple age-appropriate tasks. Difficulty with social interaction, appropriate social interaction for their age. Struggle to participate in play, appropriate play for their age. I see this a lot with our kids with significant behavior issues, and that their answer is, if I want it, I take it. If you have it, I hit you and I get it. And so that kind of thing could be an indication of executive function deficits. They need more help with tasks than the other kids, whether that's confidence. Remember, one big part of that, being able to switch, is to say, oh, but I can do that. And so confidence can certainly be an issue there. Next. So while we see these present in many kids, we know that it's especially common in some of our students with special needs. So just some examples of kids that we would anticipate are going to have probably more executive function issues than others would be our ADHD students, the students with learning disabilities or Tourette syndrome. Students with OCD, they have that switching is not going to happen easily with students with OCD. With autism, students with significant depression, and depending on, I didn't include trauma there, but certainly trauma. Students that come from traumatic backgrounds often they either are totally rigid because it's the only thing I can control, or they've thrown in the towel. I don't really give a rip. One extreme or the other in my experience. And bipolar disorder, again, these may be, depending on where they are in that cycle, they may have great difficulty with being able to manage their executive function. Next. Also noted in degenerative things, and especially in our elderly, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and dementia. These are people that's one of the first symptoms that if you look back, you reflect back, you often can see the executive function deficits that were there earlier that we didn't pick up on until they became pronounced. Next. This is so me. I drive all over the state and I drive fast, and that's not bragging. I should be ashamed, but that's where I have impulse control issues. Next. So what do we do with these kids? I mean, so we've identified what it is, what it looks like, what we should expect, but what do we do about it? So I want to give you some specific things that you can know that you can do with students. So how do we increase it? Talk about it to kids. We need to practice it. We need to tell kids, this is important for you to remember. Hold on, here's your hook for you to remember this. Remember, tomorrow we don't have PE. Remember, tomorrow we have an assembly. We have to talk to kids more and practice these things so that it becomes an automatic pattern for them. Oh, I can change it. We do get to go to PE again, just not tomorrow. Those kinds of things. So let's look. I love this quote. When kids struggle with reading, we teach them to read. They struggle with math, we teach them math. When kids struggle with executive functioning skills, let's teach them. So let me give you 40 ideas to teach executive function for all different ages, some of them in all different ages. So let's look at some ideas. So for infants, lap games with clapping, hand clapping. Peekaboo is important. Some of us just naturally think you play peekaboo. Some people don't think of that. Hiding toys and objects and then finding them. That object permanence is very important. Singing along with finger play. Singing and rhythm and all of that is extremely important to the brain. It starts in utero. There's a rhythm to mom's heartbeat in utero. And that is a soothing thing for many kids. And to say to them, and now you do it. I do this, now you do it. I do this, now you do it. So those kinds of activities. Sensory activities. How does it feel? How does it smell? How does it touch? How does it sound? Doing sensory activities with kids. Putting your hand up to your ear. It's one of the things I still do with my granddaughter. When there's anything going on, oh, wait, listen, and put your hand up to the ear. That's her cue. Stop, no talking, no fit. Put your hand up to the ear. Oh, listen. Those kind of things are very important for young children. At toddlers, starting simple board games. I start with four matching, the old matching games, right? So two sets. So I have 2 elephants and 2 chairs. Turn them upside down. Can we find the same one? And then increasing that as they have success. So very simple board games, even as young as 2. Coloring and drawing, and drawing, tracing your hand, and any of those kinds of activities. Giving them simple chores. Okay, my granddaughter loves to stand when I cook, and I have a little tower she can stand on, and she stands when I cook, and I have her do about every other instruction. Now it's your turn, and have her do it. Singing songs that include choreography. Itsy Bitsy Spider is a great one. To do those kind of things where you're not only getting the rhythm, but you're also using your hands. I'll say this, that corpus callosum between the 2 parts of the brain, that corpus callosum, anytime you get kids to cross that, so take my right hand and go across the midline of my body, left hand, right foot, left foot. When you do that, you're increasing the corpus callosum, which makes your prefrontal cortex able to orchestrate easier. So that crossing midline is important. Anytime you can do that, reaching for things on the opposite side. Let's act as if games. Let's act. How do we act? I love doing this with emotion because kids struggle sometimes with emotion. If we were going to act mad, let's act like that. What does that look like? We're going to act happy. We're going to act excited. How does that look like? Doing puzzles, any kind of puzzles. That's not only fine motor, but cognitive development. Gives them some control. Kids that come out of trauma want control usually. So important to give them some of that. Puzzles are a good way for them to help with supports to do that. For kids in pre-K kindergarten, crafts. Crafts are very much teach kids when we brag, even though that gingerbread house looks like a dilapidated shack. When we brag, it gives kids confidence. Remember, you got to have confidence to be able to self-monitor and make change. Watching animated movies, because now they're thinking it's not really a person. Talking about that's pretend is important. That's, again, that switch in your mind. Role playing, especially with the theme. So that's why we like little kitchens and we role play. I'm cooking breakfast. What do you want to have for breakfast? Telling and retelling stories and adding to those stories. Music and movement are phenomenal ways for kids to gain confidence as well, to get that rhythm that gets their brains in good patterns. Problem solving. What would happen if? This is just our pre-K kindergarten kids. What would happen if? what would happen if I dropped this glass? What might happen? Just being able to give them those kinds of problem solving. Science for kids, using very common items for their outcomes. So not going and buying a kit, but just simple things. When you drop a ball and it rolls, where did it go? Why did it fall to the floor? Just using science in their everyday world. I'm sure this is not true of any of you, but could be. For our elementary and middle school kids, exploring individual interests, making that fun research, not writing a report necessarily, but researching areas of interest that they get to share out in. So that's, again, putting kids in small groups. Remember, our employers say they don't work well in groups. Putting them in small groups at a young age and say, here's 3 of you love the Cars movie. I want you to be able to tell us who the characters are and some of the things they said that's funny, just giving them simple things to do, exploring their own interests. Organized sports, and that doesn't necessarily mean you have to join a league, but even within your classroom or within out on the playground, having organized things that they have a role, but my role is not the same as somebody else's role. Games involving strategy. I don't know if you've ever played Guess Who. I started that at a young age with my own children. I use it in therapy. Guess Who. So you have to strategize and think. Racco. Racco's an old game, but it's a numbers game, and you have to get them in order, and you have to make decisions each hand on which one you're going to take out to try to end up with them in order. For your elementary and middle school kids, those are just, there's a lot out there, but those are 2 great ones that are pretty old. Giving them projects around the house, puzzles of all kinds, yoga, martial arts, meditation. We have more and more parents that I think are using meditation in the home. So trying to help our kids. Meditation doesn't mean you sit on it, doesn't have to mean you sit on a mat and do kumbaya. It can simply mean to stop and reflect. Reflection's important, I think, and certainly once our kids are in that upper elementary, to reflect and go, how did your day go? It's why when we come back from Christmas, we should say, tell me what you did during Christmas. It's reflection. What was the best part of your Christmas? That reflection. Going back to your file cabinet, pulling out something that I've given you a hook for, go back and pull that out and talk about it then. Make and plan details for projects and activities. What do you need to do to make that snowman out of cotton balls? What are you going to have? Timed activities, starting with very short times. We throw these kids, starting in the 3rd grade, into those tests that are limited in time. And so let's start that early with our kids, understanding time frames. Maybe using, especially our kids that struggle with this, using visual timers so that they can see short time, and you have to plan within that time. Next, I'm on number 28. Rob, I hope you're there. Keep track of more than one thing at a time. Whatever that is, whatever that might be. I need you to remember who's absent today, to walk down and tell the secretary who's absent today. Any kind of just keeping track of things, more than one thing at a time. Connecting past knowledge to current knowledge. Those of us who were trained in Madeline Hunter many years ago, that's an important thing. And yesterday, remember, we talked about this and this. So what would be the next step we could talk about? And connecting those things. Engaging group work, I've talked about that. I'm huge on assigning roles. You don't just put 3 kids together and go, here, figure this out. They'll be talking about everything except that. So you give them roles. You're going to be the leader. You're going to be the one that writes down the steps of what you're doing. You're going to be the one that reports out to the rest of the class, giving them roles. Games, if you're using games for the function of increasing a skill, is a great deal. If you're using it so you can sit on your phone, it's not a great deal. And so being sure that kids understand the rules, being sure that they are gaining what you intended for them to get in games is a wonderful thing. Reflection, I just talked about that. Changing your mind mid-course. So I like to give, especially middle school kids, high school kids, you give them a problem, they start solving it, and then you say, oh, wait, I forgot to tell you such and such. And you give them another piece of information that might change their mind. Oh, wait, give them a few minutes. Oh, wait, I forgot to tell you this part. That's a great example of how to get kids where they are able to stop and pivot when needed. Next, we're talking still about middle school, high school kids. Give and follow timelines for work, everything from 30 seconds to a few days, and reiterate that often with them. If I'm going to give them 30 seconds, I'm going to say, you have 30 seconds. We're down to 15 seconds. Okay, 5 seconds. You ready? Everybody wrap it up. Practice those timelines with them. Again, working in groups with finding different solutions. Model and practice asking for help. Our middle school, high school kids struggle with this. Kids coming out of chaotic homes struggle with this because it's perceived as a weakness. So we practice that with them, and we teach them how to ask for help, that it's not a weakness. And not everybody has to say the word help. There are different ways to let people know you need help. Teaching note-taking skills, I find that our handwriting in most of our kids is absolutely deplorable. We've stopped requiring handwriting in most schools, but teaching them how to take notes, whether that's using graphic organizers or it's using an outline form. Once kids get middle school, high school, they should be able to listen and pull out important points and jot that down. And our kids with disabilities, that's often more difficult for. Maybe a good time to buddy up with somebody and let them watch and help take those notes. Wait to speak until you're called on. This is a huge issue, I think, in high schools, that kids just blurt out answers. A very frustrating thing for many teachers. Asking for more info. So where would I go to get that? What is it you need, and where would I go to get that? They have the world at their fingertips now with phone. Those of us who are a little older remember encyclopedias and having to go look things up. It is a few clicks away from them now. But do they know also how to interpret that? Is everything that they get when they click accurate? How would they know that? So teaching them about resources. And then I like starting each day with a riddle or a brain teaser. And I don't mean it for extra credit points. I mean to get their brains engaged. To just start each day with a riddle or a brain teaser of some sort. So those are my 40 things. I think our parents learned a little bit about this during the pandemic, that maybe things weren't exactly what their perception of it was. So smile. Teachers, you did a good job. So the bottom line is this: executive function doesn't just happen for many students. These skills need to be taught and practiced over and over, starting with toddlers, starting very, very young. I do want you to know I really appreciate your work. You are setting our future. Treat a child as though he already is the person he's capable of becoming. And that's very, very true. Regardless of their backgrounds or their home life or their difficulties, we have to treat them as the person that we know they're capable of becoming. That's the end. Rob, I didn't say next several times. That's the end. So again, if I can be of help, there's my contact information. You are welcome to contact me at any time. Thanks again, Joanne, for asking me to speak.
Oh, thank you, Kaylin. You have given us some interesting things to think about for parents, how parents can support children as they're growing up, as well as teachers in the classroom. I think sometimes teaching is invisible to parents. They think a child just shows up and you give them some information, but this shows what goes into it and how you support a child as they go through that growth. So I would encourage schools to share this with parents so that they can understand what they could be doing at home in little ways. Because I know when you have the children that have poor executive functioning skills, it seems like everyone's frustrated, but no one knows exactly what to do. So you've given some really good, helpful things. And we appreciate you. Is there any questions? Okay, Rob has included the slides. in the presentation slides that you could use. Please be aware that you're free to share this information with school district for training, to start a discussion with parents, to have parents work with other parents so that they can learn more about what you can do with executive functioning. So we want to thank you, Kaylin, for being with us today. And I think
Thank
we're
you.
ready to close. Y'all have a wonderful Christmas holiday. No matter what you're
Yes,
doing
yes.
or what
Enjoy
you're
your
celebrating.
downtime.
Yes,
Yes.
unplug.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
Yes,
very
yes.
much. Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye, Joe.
Bye-bye.